A mother's worst nightmare is to turn their head for a moment, and when they look back, their child is gone. Tragedy can strike in just seconds. Most missing children in the United States are related to runaways and familial abductions. It's typically rare for a child to have been taken by a stranger, but when multiple children from different families go missing from a similar area, the likelihood of an outsider being involved seems to have increased. This is the case of Christopher Dansby, Shane Walker, Andre Bryant, and Monique Rivera. Before we jump into today's case, I just wanted to remind everyone that if you have a case you want to see covered on my channel, I have a case suggestion form linked in the description box down below, where you will also find important information about the cases, such as contact info and relevant case IDs and more. And as always, my sources for today's video are in the pinned comment at the top of the comment section below this video. And another quick reminder is that today's case covers 4 people, each of whom deserve proper coverage of their story, so it is important that you watch this video to the very end to hear all 4 cases properly. Now on to today's cases. It was the evening of May 18th, 1989, when Christopher Dansby, only 2 years old at the time, was taken to the Martin Luther King Jr. Towers playground near his home by his mother. Now, they were accompanied by relatives at the time, including Christopher's grandmother. While her son played, Allison decided to leave him in the care of these relatives so that she could run down to the grocery store. Allison would have normally taken her son with her, but she hadn't brought the stroller down to the park that day. Returning only a half hour later, Allison was horrified to find that her son was nowhere to be seen. Relatives stated that while Allison was at the store, Christopher had been playing with an older boy and girl before he had disappeared. Christopher was playing with a red ball, which Allison knows they didn't own and certainly didn't bring with them. There was now no sign of Christopher, the red ball, or the children he had been playing with. Christopher's disappearance was reported to police and an investigation began. Later that day, a 7-year-old from the neighborhood told investigators that he saw Christopher walking down West 111th Street with an unidentified black male. The man was described as 6 feet tall, thin, with dreadlocked hair, likely between the ages of 25 and 30 years old. Christopher has been missing ever since. Just 3 months after Christopher's disappearance, Rosa Glover took her son Shane Walker, 19 months old at the time, to play at the very same park that Christopher had disappeared from. Rosa, just like Christopher's family, lived in the Martin Luther King Jr. Towers housing project, which meant that the park was very close by. It was the evening of August 10th, 1989, and they were enjoying a snack on a park bench when an older girl and boy asked Rosa if they could play with her son. Rosa thought it was odd at first because he was so much younger than them, but ultimately agreed. The 3 children played on the swings and the slide as Rosa watched from a park bench. At one point, a man joined Rosa on the bench and struck up conversation. The topic was the disappearance of Christopher Dansby and how parents don't always pay close enough attention and bad things can happen. Rosa hadn't been looking away for long during this conversation with the man. When she looked back, Shane was gone. Rosa immediately searched the park and even checked a nearby park, returning to the first one where she finally saw the girl and boy that her son had been playing with. When asked, the children said that they had left Shane at the first park and that they didn't know where he was. The police were contacted and an investigation began into Shane's disappearance as well. The girl and boy that Shane had been playing with were questioned, and the man that Rosa had spoken with on the park bench was questioned, and other potential witnesses at the park were questioned as well. Police were able to determine that they were looking for an unidentified black male who stood 5 feet 8 inches tall, had dreadlocked hair, was wearing a yellow shirt and acid-washed jeans, and who may have been between 19 and 24 years old. It was just 5 days after Shane's disappearance that the Manhattan Chief of Detectives, Ronald Finrick, confirmed that they believed the cases were connected. He said in a statement, "Whoever abducted these children is related by some type of conspiracy to steal children or in the selling of the children." At first, the police didn't want to believe that the cases were connected because it is statistically not likely, but in the end, the similarities between the cases couldn't be ignored. But what were these similarities? Well, Christopher and Shane were both black toddlers, only a few short months apart in age. They both lived in the same housing project and both disappeared from the same park. Both toddlers disappeared on a Thursday in the evening hours as well. The most strange similarity, though, is that Christopher and Shane were both playing with the same girl and boy prior to their disappearances, which was confirmed by police. Now, the Playmates had been a 10-year-old girl who, according to an article at the time of these disappearances, was named Crystal, and her 5-year-old brother, Kevin. It's unclear if the children were questioned after Christopher's disappearance, but they were extensively questioned by police following Shane's disappearance, and it was determined that the children did not know where either toddler had gone. In addition to this, police investigated the parents of these children and determined that there was no reason to believe that the children or their parents were involved in the disappearances. You may be wondering why it is important for police to have determined whether or not these children were involved in the toddlers' disappearances. The reason for this is because children can and have been used by predators as lures. Other children can be utilized by a predator to convince a child that they are safe and just playing with other kids in order to get them away from their parents, or they can be utilized to make the parents feel that their child is safe playing with other kids, and while their guard is down for just a moment longer, the child disappears. Now, I would be highly interested to know if the girl and boy had any other information that they could provide today as adults that would help the investigation. As previously mentioned, the police did quickly determine that Christopher and Shane's cases could be connected. It was reported in newspapers that all 1,800 apartments in the Martin Luther King Jr. Towers had been checked over 3 times. A cadaver dog was used to check sewers and nearby abandoned buildings as well. And it was reported that over 500 potential sightings in all 50 states and even Canada had been filed and investigated. At the time, the city produced a $30,000 reward for information about the children's whereabouts and information about their disappearances and who was involved. There was one large lead that seemed to be followed in each case that came up during my research. For Christopher's case, there had been a body found in 1991 in the woods outside Atlantic City. It was a cold January when the body was discovered, and it was badly decomposed, but the size fit Christopher's description. In the end, though, Christopher was ruled out as a potential match via footprints. For Shane's case, his mother received a phone call just a few days after his disappearance, and the caller claimed that Shane had been buried inside an abandoned building. The building was investigated and searched thoroughly, but it seems from news reports at the time that nothing turned up in relation to Shane or his disappearance. Rosa Glover appeared on a couple of talk shows after Shane's disappearance where she spoke with psychics about his case. My personal opinion on psychics is that they are very unreliable and that people should not take them at their word. However, I am aware that this opinion does not line up with a lot of people's opinions on psychics and their usefulness to true crime investigations. I've always wanted to cover the topic of psychics in true crime on this channel, and I hope that I can do that eventually. If you are interested in a video like that, please be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Now, these psychics claimed that Shane was alive and well, had been sold to another family who loved him, and it was also claimed by Sylvia Brown, a psychic who had inserted herself into a number of true crime investigations over the years, that Shane was learning to play the piano. One psychic told of a vision of a Hispanic man who drove to Philadelphia in a station wagon with Shane before selling him to another family. Now, following these disappearances, there were rumors that Allison Dansby had either sold her son to obtain drugs or had sold her son off to pay a drug debt. There were also rumors that because of a drug debt, someone had come and taken Christopher. Allison Dansby has admitted that she was an addict, but she strongly refutes any claims that she had anything to do with her son's disappearance and states that she never owed anyone money. I have never seen police address these rumors. Allison Dansby and her family members reportedly participated in lie detector tests, which, if you've watched my videos for a while now, you may know that I do not agree with the use of lie detectors, and I do not take the results of lie detectors seriously because of how inherently flawed the entire concept of them is. If you want to know more about that, I have an entire video on the history and science behind lie detector tests that I will link in the description box down below. Now, according to a newspaper article, the results of these tests were inconclusive. Again, I do not believe that this means anything at all, but do with that information what you will. It seems clear to me that, at least publicly, the idea that Allison Dansby could have been involved in her son's disappearance or that anything that happened to him was drug-related is not a concern of investigators. In the same realm of familial suspicions, though, we need to discuss an insurance policy. 2 weeks prior to Shane's disappearance, his mother Rosa had taken out a life insurance policy on Shane. The family had been planning to fly to Florida to go to Disney World, and Rosa was anxious about this flight. Fearing that the plane could crash, she arranged for a life insurance policy. In statements since the disappearance, Rosa has discussed their trip to Florida, describing how much of a good time they had and reminiscing on the fact that Shane seemed to be scared of Mickey Mouse. Now, it wasn't until 1997 that the public or even the police became aware of an insurance policy. In 1997, a judge ordered that the insurance company needed to pay out the terms of the policy. The case had gone to a judge because there was no death certificate for Shane. The insurance company stated that they pay out in the event of a death, not in the event of a missing child. So they sent the claim to the courts to determine if Shane would be considered as having passed away. The judge ordered that any person missing and not found after a reasonable effort of 3 years can be considered dead in terms of an insurance policy. When this information came to light, it was also revealed that Rosa had originally attempted to collect on the insurance policy just 7 weeks after Shane's disappearance. While many find this suspicious, and the police did state back in 97 that they would look into the potential implications of this new information, I think we need to take Rosa and the insurance company's words into account here. According to Rosa, she hadn't been thinking about the insurance policy when Shane disappeared, and she only tried to collect on it after the man who sold it to her told her that she may be entitled to that money. In addition to this, the insurance company themselves stated in 1997 that they did not have any evidence or reason to believe that the insurance policy was related to Shane's disappearance or that it implicated Rosa Glover. Christopher and Shane's cases are not the only ones believed by many to potentially be linked, however. There is yet another case that took place 2 months prior to Christopher's disappearance that some believe may be connected. In March of 1989, Monique Rivera and her 3 sons were shopping in their neighborhood when they met 2 women. Now, these women treated Monique and her kids to lunch at McDonald's before taking them on a shopping spree at the Green Acres shopping mall, which they had paid for with stolen credit cards. That night, Monique showed her husband an outfit from the shopping trip and told him that 2 friends from high school had bought the clothes for her. Some reports also state that Monique knew one or both of the women from middle school instead of high school. It's hard to tell which report is more accurate, but I wanted to put it out there that my research did show that both possibilities had been mentioned in news reports. It was supposedly confirmed by police that a pair of gold-colored slacks and a black blouse had been bought for Monique from a store called Canadians. The next day, March 29th, the same 2 women had invited Monique out for another shopping trip. Monique's sister-in-law had come over to watch the children, but the women called from a payphone and insisted that Monique bring her 1-month-old son, Andre Bryant, along for the shopping trip. During this trip, they had been planning to shop at the Galleria Mall in Westchester County. Monique and Andre were last seen together getting into a 1988 or 1989 Burgundy Pontiac Grand Am that may have had Maryland license plates. The following day, a jogger discovered Monique's body on the shore of Eastchester Bay in the Bronx. Now, Monique had been bludgeoned and strangled to death with her own scarf. Andre has never been seen again. Following his abduction, divers searched the Eastchester Bay area and police canvassed the area on land. A nationwide alert had been issued for Andre, and the FBI also got involved. 2 days later, a woman called Monique's home asking to speak to her. Monique's mother had answered the phone and informed the caller that Monique was dead. The woman then said, "Monique can't be dead. I was just shopping with her the last 2 days." It seems that this woman provided an address, but police determined that it didn't check out. The only other information the woman provided was a name, Joan Walker. Police have not been able to find any further information on this woman as far as I can tell. Now, the woman that Monique and Andre had been seen with were described as follows: 1 black woman who may have been around 35 years old, and a black or Hispanic woman who had bushy orange hair. Monique and Andre's family have had to live with the death of a wife and mother, and the family's youngest child having disappeared ever since. So what may have happened to these children? There are a few theories to discuss. The simplest theories are that the boys were taken by a pedophile who may or may not have kept them long term, or by a person who desperately wanted a child but did not or could not have one of their own for a number of possible reasons. Some believe that the boy and the girl that Christopher and Shane had had been playing with prior to their disappearances were somehow involved, likely used as lures to separate the toddlers from their family members so that an adult could swoop in and snatch them at just the right moment. It is not unheard of for this type of thing to happen. It is certainly possible that a pedophile could have taken one or both of the boys, and it is also possible that someone desperate for a child could have also kidnapped one or both of the boys. Not all people are convinced, however, that Andre's case may be linked to Christopher and Shane's cases. One theory posited in relation to only Andre's case is that the woman who had taken Monique and Andre shopping were hoping to utilize Andre in their credit card scams. It is theorized that retail employees would less likely scrutinize a woman with a young child using credit cards that didn't have their name on them, which would make it easier for these women to use the stolen cards in their possession. Some believe that the woman may have told Monique this and that she didn't agree with it, and when she tried to leave, they murdered her and took Andre for themselves. Before we jump into the next theory, I do just want to say that I find it to be particularly outlandish and to not have any true merit for reasons that I will cover. It is important that we break down why this theory would have cropped up during this time frame and why it should not likely be taken seriously. Now, there were rumors that reached investigators that there may have been a cult originating from one or more islands in the Caribbean, including Puerto Rico, St. Croix, and St. Thomas. Now, these rumors allege that people were traveling from these islands to kidnap children that they were using as sacrifices for occult activity. So let's break down what I believe to be the ridiculousness of this theory. The kidnappings of these children happened well within the time of what is known today as the Satanic Panic. This was a period through the 1980s and early 1990s in which fear of satanic cults was running rampant, and a large number of people were falsely accused and even falsely imprisoned. There were claims of satanic ritual abuse, primarily of children, throughout the United States, which led to many people, and especially parents, being accused of things that never happened. Once the panic began to take hold, interrogation and interview techniques often led supposed victims to claim outlandish events that never happened and were oftentimes literally impossible, such as being flushed down toilets at a preschool. And they also broke suspects of such cases until they were willing to confess to anything to make an interrogation end. Two of the most notable trials that were deeply rooted in the Satanic Panic are the McMartin preschool trial and the trial of the West Memphis Three. In 1992, the Department of Justice debunked the idea of satanic ritual abuse and denounced the Satanic Panic. However, police departments still continue to operate under the fear instilled by the Satanic Panic, and even to this day, many people are likely to discriminate against others who they think fit the description of a Satan worshiper or occultist. Much like witch hunts and the Red Scare of the Cold War era, the Satanic Panic did irreparable damage to many people and communities. The Satanic Panic is an interesting period of true crime history and is something that I would definitely want to cover in depth in a separate video. If you would be interested in a video like that, please let me know that in the comments down below. Now, the last theory that we will discuss in relation to these cases is the theory that the boys were kidnapped to be sold in a black market baby ring. This type of operation sells children to people who would typically not be able to adopt because of finances or that they wouldn't be approved by a legal adoption agency. Some people also turn to these kinds of operations to seek out children that may not be plentiful in the legal adoption world, whether that be to do with gender, race, or other specific features of a child that someone adopting may be looking for. At the time of the disappearances, local adoption agencies stated that they didn't believe it likely because the legal adoption world had a plethora of black children available for adoption. But I would argue that this point of view doesn't take into account the people who may be looking to adopt but wouldn't be able to do so through legal means. Today, it seems that the black market adoption is the most widely accepted theory in this case. To this day, there are groups of people who either do or don't believe that these cases are connected. It seems that opinion on these cases is most likely to sway toward Christopher and Shane's cases being connected, but Andre's case being a separate incident altogether. But what makes these three cases really stand out and potentially make law enforcement see a connection? Now, to answer that question, I'm going to turn towards some more recent statistics, but statistics that still seem to reflect the general conclusions over the past few decades. In 2010, there were 6,544 children reported missing throughout New York City. About 98% of those missing children were runaways. and 121 cases were familial abductions. Only 11 of the original 6,544 cases involved children who were reported missing under other circumstances. In the grand scheme of things, it's rare for a child to have been abducted by a stranger. Oftentimes, missing children are related to familial abductions, such as when a parent without custody runs off with their child, or the missing child is a runaway. So when you suddenly have something like what we're seeing here, 3 cases in such a close time frame that police cannot find familial connections for, it's extremely odd and leads to the possibility that these cases may be connected. To this day, it seems that each of the families of these cases hopes that their child is still alive and out there somewhere. The parents hope that their baby was raised by another family and is now living a full life. Unfortunately, we may never know what really happened to these boys or who murdered Monique Rivera. Christopher and Shane's families have provided DNA profiles to help with potentially identifying the boys if remains are discovered or if somebody comes forward claiming to be Christopher or Shane. I was unable to find specific mention of any DNA being provided in Andre's case, but I do believe that his father and 2 brothers are still alive and could be used for comparison purposes. If you have any information related to Christopher Dansby, Shane Walker, Andre Bryant, or Monique Rivera, I would highly suggest that you contact the New York City Police Department 83rd Precinct at 212-694-7781. What are your thoughts on today's cases? These were difficult for me to cover because as a mother, I hate to imagine something like this happening to my own child, but it's just a reminder of why these cases are so important to cover. I personally think that Christopher and Shane's disappearances are likely connected, but I'm not sure about Andre's. I think it's certainly possible. Perhaps Andre was taken first, and it was determined that interacting with the parent of the child that was being targeted led to too much trouble, so the people involved changed their tactics and targeted children at the park because they could wait until the parent wasn't looking to take them. And I do hope that these children were able to live full lives and that they may still be alive and out there somewhere today. Let me know what your thoughts and theories are on these cases in the comment section down below, but as always, remember to remain respectful. And as always, please help to keep these kinds of cases in the public eye by sharing this video, another video, any of the sources provided. Just keep sharing so that hopefully someone somewhere who knows something will be inspired to come forward and potentially crack a case wide open. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you all again soon for another case.